The UK is going to increase spending on defence and security to 5% of GDP. Not until 2035, but of course this is the new NATO target, expected to be formally agreed by allies. But it comes on the day that it looks like there's this big rebellion against the welfare cuts. And, you know, there's an argument, isn't there? We're spending a lot, I mean, billions on war, and people can understand why. It's like a more dangerous world.
In a sense, not as much as Starmer would want us to think, because there's a lot of spin, I think, about these figures, but this is an extraordinary rebellion now growing in the Labour ranks. The select committee chairmen, these chairwomen have been elected by MPs to run these committees that look at various department spending. The big one is Treasury. Meg Hillier, part of this a motion that's been put down condemning the cuts. There's a vote on Tuesday. Labour thought they could manage this revolt. It is spinning and spiralling out of control.
Is that...
These are big hitters.
80 Labour MPs, not sort of the usual suspects, if I can use that phrase. 80 is a lot, Kevin.
Yeah,
it looks like they could sink the welfare cuts at this stage altogether.
We were discussing this a few minutes before we came in. I think Labour's notional majority is 156.
OK.
So you would need 78 to Labour people to turn around and rebel.
Reform and the Tories
every other opposition party,
And I think we know that Reform will vote against the welfare reform.
But so will the...
will the Conservatives...
They will find an opportunistic way to do it.
They will say...
Because they are opposition.
Yeah, the Conservatives will say the cuts don't go deep enough. That's why they will do it. They will say they don't go deep enough.
Or they're not targeting the right area.
So you'll have Labour MPs saying they go too deep, so we're going to vote against them. And then the Conservatives say, oh, yeah, we think they don't go deep enough, so they'll just somehow unite in a rather dirty, shabby alliance, has got to be said, but nevertheless...
That's opposition.
It is opposition, you're quite right. Yeah. He's in trouble. He's in serious trouble, Starmer. Now, people tend to melt away, but not always. Not always. And when you've got all these select committee chairs, you'll have new MPs who will be told your career will be over, you won't be made a minister if you rebel. They're saying, I don't care about that. I just feel very deeply about it.
No, they care about losing their seat, Kevin. That's what some of them...
Well, they do that, but some people, believe it or not, in politics have principles.
Oh, yeah.
I think the rise in defence spending is ridiculous and won't make us safer. It'll be a waste of money. You buy an extra tank, you can't show why that makes you safer. You take away somebody's personal independence payment, somebody who is disabled, I can show you how you make their life worse.
Well, didn't the government's own assessment show that these cuts to welfare would mean 250,000 extra people would be pushed into poverty?
Including 50,000 children. Now, the government is... because governments do good things and bad things, and they're boasting that extending free school meals to all kids in families getting universal credit. Believe it or not, there's some don't at the moment. That'll take 100,000 kids out of poverty eventually, they say. But you're putting another 50,000 kids into poverty. If Labour exists for anything and has any mission, it must be to make Britain a fairer, better country and cut and eradicate poverty.
And a bit of parliamentary process on this. I mean, you know, this is not an amendment to the bill to say, let's change this bit or change that bit.
Right.
This is the chair of the Treasury Committee, a Labour chair, the chair of the Welfare Committee, a Labour chair, with this huge rebellion saying that we decline to allow this whole legislation to move forward. So if they win, it's not like a little change here. No. The whole thing goes. They have to start totally again. I don't think I can remember seeing such an organised, by committee chairs, assault on a piece of government legislation like this.
And that's because Labour, he's not taken these people with him. He's not made the case. They've not made the argument at all. And you can't buy off these committee chairmen because you know what happens. They say, we'll give you a ministerial job, old boy or old girl, for being sexist. They're committee chair people. They've been elected. They earn a little bit of extra money and they're doing their job well. That's why this is a serious revolt. And I don't recall one of this gravity ever.
I don't, and not this organised.
No,
and so very organised.
When you get the straw that breaks the camel's back. You've had the winter fuel allowance where Labour MPs voted for that really reluctantly. Well, then you get the abandonment of the WASPy women. In opposition, you campaign, you say they deserve pension justice, then all of a sudden now we're not going to do it. And then you get to this, and it was presented as just a way of saving money. That's what it was presented. I remember the presentation. It was all about saving money. Now they're trying to turn it round and say, oh, we've got big plans to get people into work, which is the Labour way. It was Gordon Brown's mission to get people into work. But that's come too late. And it can just show the direct impact on people's lives. Susanna, you've interviewed.
Yeah.
I remember the woman who's going to lose her money, the woman who's bipolar. And some days she's fine, other days she's not. Do you really want to make...
And she works, by the way.
Yes.
Because then we have the government minister saying, you know, we can't have all these people out of work. But PIP is not an out-of-work benefit. A lot of people claim PIP, and that enables them to continue working.
Yeah, so it goes against everything you want to do, right? If anyone... I know, so I'm saying, if anyone's gaming the system, we'll call it.
Well, they do.
If anyone's gaming the system, weed them out.
Yeah.
That's what you do, but you don't want to hurt the people.
No, and also, of course, if you take away the benefit, which means that they cannot work, then, of course, they stop contributing to GDP. That's
right. Economically, it backfires on you, but it's also just morally wrong.
If you remember what happened,
you're hurting people.
There's a classic kind of lesson for new governments which you have to learn. If you remember what happened in the final days before the spring statement in March, it became clear that the Treasury was off track on their fiscal objectives they had to set out. At the last minute, they made changes to the welfare reforms so late that the Office of Budget Responsibility couldn't assess them. They did that to get the money, and they now found out that the cost of getting the money is that big rise in child poverty and this rebellion. And in the end, it was short-termist, last-minute policy-making going wrong. And that's what happens.
So are you saying that what happened was the Chancellor did her maths, did her sums, said this doesn't add up, went to the person in charge of welfare and said you're going to have to cut some money.
In the final days.
95 billion.
This happened in the in the Conservative era and the Conservative Liberal Democrat era, where Ian Duncan Smith was working pension secretary. He eventually resigned because he couldn't take any more cuts. But I discussed with him once. I remember the bedroom tax, which if you were in social housing, all of a sudden you were deemed to have an extra bedroom. You're going to get hit with a big penalty unless you moved out. And that was just because George Osborne, the then Chancellor, wanted £1 billion. Wanted £1 billion, and how do you get it? There we are. Let's have the bedroom
and that
tax.
Austerity.
And it's terrible.
And interesting, isn't it? It was a Tory Work and Pension Secretary who resigned his cabinet job, and then we've got a Labour cabinet secretary.
So that's interesting then.
With Labour chairs.
So what you're suggesting then is that everything that the Work and Pension Secretary who's in charge of welfare, Liz Kendall, is saying is kind of reverse engineering. It's kind of justifying it because she says these welfare reforms are needed. Greater spending on benefits alone is no route to social justice. The path to a fairer society, one where everyone thrives, where people who can work get the support they need and where we protect those who cannot, that is the path we seek to build with our reforms.
All true. And I would say pretty much every one of the people who will sign the Rebel Amendment agree with that. But what they'll say is, look, yes, it's the case, the welfare bill has gone up hugely. There's loads of people who should be working and are not being supported to work. Big rise in mental health challenges after the pandemic. Of course, we should be finding a way to make the welfare system more supportive of work. That takes time. To begin with, it actually costs some money, but in the end, you make big savings. Whereas, in fact, what happened with these reforms is because they needed money quickly, they've ended up taking away money from people who are clearly disabled, aren't going to work, and are just going to have their benefits cut. And that is the thing which is upsetting people. It's the disjuncture between what Liz Kendall says there and what the impact assessment says the result of the legislation is actually going to be.
The irony is there are so many people on benefits, in my view, who should not be, who should be helped back into work, and that the benefit system is part of the problem here. And yet her reforms on PIP could drive even more people off of work, out of work, onto benefits, which is why I think they've got the whole thing the wrong way around.
Yeah. So last night, 2 young claimants of PIP, personal independent payments, confronted the business secretary, Jonathan Reynolds, over these proposed disability cuts at a Labour Party fundraiser. One of them currently receives PIP and one has had an application for PIP rejected and is awaiting a tribunal decision. Both live, they say, with severe mental illness. Kevin, I mean, it does remind me of the winter fuel allowance sort of backlash. You know, you introduce something that doesn't feel very Labour, and so people who would perhaps expect more from a Labour government supporting those who are less likely to be able to support themselves feel a bit I don't know how those two individuals vote, but I imagine that there are some who feel this doesn't look like social justice.
But Liz Kendall, the Labour Work and Pensions Secretary, was condemning the cuts when the Conservatives were making them, and now she's making cuts of her own, which is trying to change how they're justified.
Yeah, the welfare bill is projected to become, I would imagine, in the government's words, unsustainable. It is ballooning.
A bit like the defence bill,
Right.
Which they're deliberately putting up. So if you're going to
if
you're going to be shoveling money into an inept, wasteful Ministry of Defence, which is it's a byword in
defence procurement has been a disaster for 30 years.
Absolutely, and it hasn't got to the Defence Secretary. The Defence Secretary, John Ely, says he's getting to grips with it.
Can I ask, just on defence, if we've seen, as we have in the last couple of days, Israel saying that they're acting as the world's policeman and sorting issues out, and then America coming in to support them and also acting as the world's policeman, why does the UK, which doesn't seem to be able to even take a position on whether they support what's going on or not, why does the UK need to increase its defence budget?
Oh, that's a good point. That's a good point, unless you think you're going to be attacked by Israel or the USA, which I suggest is not going to happen. No, look, they can just come up with figures all the time. Let's go 2.5%, 3%. Let's go to 5%. Where they're going to stop?
But the reason
we spend in cash terms. I think it's the 6th biggest total in the world already. We more than meet the NATO obligation. I think
but we're not getting involved in this military action. We haven't had to say whether we support it. We've done nothing.
No one's threatening to invade us.
No.
Or attack us. However balmy some people get about Russia and saying, oh, if you don't spend all this extra cash, you'll have to learn to speak Russian. I think there was a NATO Secretary General who clearly had a bang to the head that morning. You know, we don't need to spend extra. We're spending enough.
It doesn't feel very balmy to talk about the Russian threat if you live in Ukraine at the moment. Yeah. Our ability to defend...
We don't live in Ukraine, do we?
No. Our ability to defend our border depends upon American military prowess in Europe. The Americans are saying, Trump is saying, that he is going to pull away or threatens to pull away unless we spend more. And the whole of the NATO alliance is just agreeing in these days that we have to all spend 3.5% and on defence, 5% on security. And Keir Starmer is trying to come into line on that. And the reason is to try and anchor America into Europe to protect us against the Russian threat. Isn't that what it's about?
It's the most serious war in Europe since the Second World War. And if he gets away with it, does he then go into Poland? Where else does he go?
Well, he's not got away with it, has he?
And I don't think Trump would lift
a
finger. We cannot rely on Trump to be our international policeman anymore.
But the Ukrainians have been heroic. It was the one thing Boris Johnson probably did I agreed with that stepped up immediately and gave military aid. Was it 2.5–3 billion a year? Russia's been bled dry. They've lost a million men, some women, either killed, maimed, or otherwise injured. No, you suffer. Like, it's one of those. It's a Pyrrhic victory so far, taking land that is now wasteland.
Well, let's turn our attention from matters of global importance to the issue of Lime bikes on our streets. And frankly, if you're someone like Dame Joan Collins, and I know a lot of the older generation do find this a more immediate problem. Dame Joan Collins says she's shocked by the loutish behaviour of Lime bike users. She shared a photograph on Instagram showing her standing next to seemingly abandoned Lime bikes, clustered together on a London pavement, and she wrote, "Pavements are for pedestrians."
I'm not sure she's fully understanding the concept of Lime bikes. You don't abandon them.
You park them.
You just stop using them and
but often they're just...
But they are often on the pavement.
On the pavement.
Where would you
horizontal.
I know.
Well, they've been knocked over, but
and also they cycle...
It's up to councils to decide whether they have a special place or not.
But they're also a flipping menace. They cycle on the pavements too. They're a menace.
Users have to photograph where they are left. I'm pretty certain, because you see people doing it. Some will be inconsiderate. I'll go with a
lot, Kevin.
But I think that the bigger menace is on the roads because people are riding without helmets and riding recklessly. And as a pedestrian who walks a lot around London, I also cycle, but my own pedal power, people on electric bikes go too fast and they're reckless.
Yes.
And there's actually been
they're not used to biking.
And I think I'm right in saying there's been some, in the last day or so, some particularly loutish non-helmet
I
line
don't
bike
think we
riding.
would describe Simon Cowell as loutish.
Wouldn't we?
No. And,
In Kevin's word. Kevin's word.
he was filmed riding in South London.
There he is.
Without a helmet, but it is not a legal requirement to wear a helmet, although I think people should. Simon, I think you should wear a helmet for your own protection.
He's currently looking around trying to decide where to abandon his line bike, Jane.
I'm not sure that's
Some
true
people
either.
some people are a little too vain to wear a helmet because they think it messes up their hair.
But the whole point about a line bike is you walk down the road and you suddenly think, I haven't got time to get there on foot. I'll get a line bike. Unless you whip a helmet out of your bag, you've got no choice.
I think the concept is really good to get around cities. You get schemes in other urban areas.
Where's Simon Cowell's chauffeur? That's what I want to know.
I love it. That he also
good for him.
I think he was lost in those pictures, but I love the fact with such good grace he engages. He doesn't go, "Don't film me," you know, put your camera away. He's just like, "Yeah, I'll have a chat. Can you help me know
Are you sure?
where I'm going?"
I reckon he was in hair and makeup for 10 minutes before he did that shot.
That's unkind.
Pristine white T-shirt.
I suspect he never goes out without being...
I love the fact he's wearing a puffer jacket on one of the hottest days of the year.
But he has got a reputation for being engaging.